Hey everybody, Matt Yonkovit, head of open source strategy here at Percona with another episode of The Hoss, that's me, Talks Foss. Yes, we're here to give you the best in the open source space. Today we've got an extra special episode, so we love it that you've tuned in to watch. So I'm here with Alkin today to talk a little bit about Vitess and what he's been up to. So Alkin, what have you been up to since you've left Percona?
Good question. I took some time off, some people know, and I did sail around a little bit. After that, I have joined the Planetscale with the Vitess team. And open source Vitess, we have a project, and I'm part of the maintainers group. We have internal and external maintainers for the project. It's a CNCF project, as some of you know. And it's a very busy project. It's been hectic for the last 6 months. And by being a CNCF project, we release every 3 months. So it's quarterly release cycle. It's pretty intense in terms of it. And there are no minor releases or other than just release candidate 3 weeks prior to GA. It's a push.
Wow. Yeah, that's fast. That's a lot of stuff.
We were talking about hundreds of PRs.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
And so with that, so do you do still the community stuff on the Vitess? So you're answering questions in between trying to get all these ready to go and, offering people help and things like that. So you're just all over the board, right?
I am all over the board, but I'm new to Vitess. Vitess has very significant contributors and adopters, and they are very advanced in the game. So knowing the database is not enough. The ecosystem is pretty complex when it comes down to sharding and scaling hundreds of thousands of database instances in the cloud. So there's a little bit of a catch up to do. And I do try to help, the little bit of MySQL knowledge, little bit of the community knowledge. So it's mix and match bag and try to wear multiple hats. Mostly like the developer relations. So we have internal and external developers for the Vitess project. And there's a cycle of things that needs to be done. With that 3 months, quarterly release cycle, it's a lot. And also the public relations and the communications, right? The blog posts and all that stuff. So.
Yeah, and Vitess has really just taken off. It's skyrocketed in terms of popularity. I know that there's several large organizations who are contributing and are using it in production. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those organizations? Maybe mention a few.
One of the good things with Vitess is already being adopted by very large shops, and those who actually adopt it internally, they also contribute back to the Vitess project, and that's the beauty of it. And we don't always have to be investing into just the Vitess development and the release. We get help from the adopters, and some of them are being public, some of them are not being public. I'm not sure which ones I'm supposed to tell, which ones I'm not. Okay. You know how it goes, but there is one that I think it's publicly announced is Slack. Slack has been doing a migration, and they've actually fully cut over. And Slack has been super busy with the pandemic around the world. Everyone's using it.
Obviously, yes.
They had very busy systems. With this scalable architecture, they are able to actually migrate over and handle the load that's coming in around the world with everyone's working from home. You know how that goes. And there are some others actually deployed and using, not making very public announcement, but they're contributing back. So it's an open source project. You can see their names in GitHub and all that stuff. So like I said, there are some logos that we actually publish because they were permitted, but it's there are very big shops. When I say big, they are big.
Well, and Vitess was originally built by YouTube, right? So to manage YouTube.
Yes.
So you can kind of think of YouTube scale, and that's the type of scale that Vitess was originally designed for.
Designed for YouTube and Google, and that's Borg, their internal system, and also interesting fact is it predates the Kubernetes. Also, it works with Kubernetes, but it predates the Kubernetes. So it's actually evolved around the cloud with the Kubernetes. So it's interesting.
And so you can use Vitess with Kubernetes or without.
Yes, absolutely. You can use without the Kubernetes. You can bare metal, you could do it bare metal or like the cloud, whatever, you can set it up, but you can also use it with the Kubernetes. So that's the good part of it.
Okay, great. Great. Now, the most important question of maybe this whole discussion that we're going to have is, where did you go sailing?
So that's an interesting part. During the pandemic, that was completely unplanned, and something popped up that I was watching, and because of the pandemic, the tourism was down in Croatia, and they actually had to put out some sailboats for sale so they can actually turn around the shops for some cash amount for their staff and workers. So I contacted them. I had to wait for about 3 weeks to travel, actually, because we were not permitted to fly. And I got permissions. I got business permissions to fly over from Turkey to Croatia, and did the transaction over there with very many difficulties. Like the government offices are closed. You don't have permissions to get in and out places, like sign in documents. So I hired a bunch of people to do work remotely. And basically, long story short, I actually bought a sailboat from Croatia and sailed all the way from Croatia, crossing like 4 different seas, all the way back to Istanbul in about like a 2-month period. It took about like 60 days. And, total with the transactions and all that. Then when we entered, interesting things happened. During that time, Greece actually closed their borders and they didn't let us actually, anchor or dock. So we had like a very difficult crossing for 9 days straight, nonstop. Out in the Ionian and the Aegean Sea. So it was interesting.
I mean, that's a scary thing, right? Because there's so many people who have gone sailing or done stuff where there's no ports that will let them in.
Yes,
during the pandemic.
like
So
for refueling, we actually refueled some places that we actually had to use, like WhatsApp communication. And then we said, okay, we're going to be there around like 5 o'clock. Please bring a small tanker. We'll just refuel and just take off, not, going to dock. So things like that happened. I hope to actually blog about this with pictures and videos that I actually have.
wow.
But it's been super busy, so didn't get a chance.
Well, wow, that's some crazy stuff. I know that you have long been a sailing fan, so it's something that you've done on your time off, your vacation time. It's your passion, right? And everybody
Right.
has their passion. I know that a lot of people have the passion around open source, and you just happen to have sailing and open source both. So that's an awesome, combination.
Yes.
So what lessons have you learned from sailing that you apply to open source?
It's more like sharing. A lot goes on around the sailing community about knowledge sharing, help around questions. So when we actually sailed for I can't even measure, maybe like 72 hours nonstop, and our autopilot died, and it basically burned. It just didn't survive. It
Wow.
overheated and it just died, and I didn't know that it would just die or not. So I immediately got into the community and started asking questions like you would ask in a forum or other places, like on a Slack channel. And people actually started troubleshooting with me while I'm sailing. So they said, okay, go check the fuse, go check the cable, measure this, measure that. We get like so much help. And when we actually reached out to, final port, we got help with community. They said, okay, find this person. They will come and troubleshoot. They took it around. Before my last passage, like about like 500 nautical miles, it was actually fixed. So it was fixed less than 2 weeks. They took it away and rebuilt it and reinstalled it. That was amazing, actually. And
Wow. Yeah,
and yes, it's all community help. And I paid for the maintenance, staff, but it was, you can't, like money can't buy everything. So
well, and I think that's the thing that has attracted me over the years to the MySQL and the open source community is it's been so welcoming and so open arms to so many different people. It's been a really great experience to see when you can get in and help someone solve some of their issues, but also make the products better. And I think that's one of the cool things with any open source community. Now, from a Vitess perspective, as you're building out and working on the community for Vitess, you said it's vibrant already. It's growing. It's active. What are the things you are looking for, and where can people help get involved in Vitess and in the project?
Absolutely. It's actually one of the things that we always talk with the open source Vitess team, almost like weekly basis, is what contributions that we can get without impacting the project lifecycle. Because there's a milestone, there are some established goals. One of the biggest thing over there is the feedback, testing and feedback. What usually developers, like in open source developers, don't experience is the field experience. Like if we're not running hundreds of shards or n number of nodes in clusters, we wouldn't know the impacts of it. Benchmarks, super useful information. That kind of feedback is actually makes the products better for all open source products. As you get feedback, you get actually improve, and that the other thing is Vitess is a very MySQL centric project, and it actually works with MariaDB. So we're also looking for MariaDB contribution and MariaDB adopters, if there are any. Just like any other open source, we don't know if they're already using it. So it could be like some big shop in India, maybe in China, they're already like launched thousands of shards. We don't know like if that is there. So
and I think this is one of the areas that a lot of people don't realize, that to make the open source projects better and to grow, you need that operational feedback. And people don't realize that that is a massive contribution, whether it is knowledge sharing, just at attending a conference, giving a talk, or providing blog examples, talking to people in the community, providing the environment that they're running in and the challenges that they've done. People think it's only code that is a positive contribution, but honestly, code is 50% of what needs to happen.
I'll tell you what, even just documentation is amazing. We have Chinese contribution from China that someone actually sat down and translated everything to Chinese.
Oh, wow.
They put it in a pull request, but we can't verify. So we're looking for somebody to review. We have nobody to actually read that. So that's very interesting. Like that is amazing. Like if there are other people who wants to actually do translation, just documentation, right? But we're looking for someone to actually contribute back. So if they can review, if the information is good enough, we could just publish it, right? So then others can actually benefit.
Yeah, and I think that is the great thing about the community, is it's crowdsourcing the project, really. And there's all these different pieces, and it takes all the pieces to make things work, whether it's translation, whether it's documentation, whether it's helping solve bugs, contributing code, or like I mentioned, the contribution of knowledge and training. All these things are so valuable, and it's so interesting to see where people draw that line in their heads. I really would love to start with an open source project, but I don't know how to code. Well, you don't have to, right? Most of the DBAs, and myself included, when I started, I learned MySQL because I had problems, right? I learned the internals because I found issues. And that's how most of the great open source software that we see today started, right? You see a problem. Vitess started because YouTube had a problem scaling MySQL.
Yeah, there was some pain points that they actually implemented it. That's absolutely. That's how it is.
And so I think that's where this whole evolution of individual ecosystems is so interesting. And that's why you have to be so welcoming, because you never know which thing you're going to need next. And it spans the globe between DBAs, developers, DevOps, sysadmins, even marketing people, right? Who can contribute, copy editing skills or review documentation in their local language. All of these things, provide an invaluable resource to projects like Vitess. So really, really exciting time period to be in any open source community. But as we know, like I mentioned, Vitess is growing quite a bit. And I've gotten quite a few questions on Vitess specifically over the last few weeks from
Mm-hmm.
people in the community. And
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping maybe we could take a second and take a step back, and maybe we should have done this at the beginning of this discussion. But when we talk about Vitess, people really want to know, what is the use case and where should they be deploying this? Because for a lot of people, they fall into two camps, right? One is, oh, we're not big enough for Vitess. The other one is, we want to be big enough for Vitess. We probably shouldn't run Vitess right now, but we're going to run it anyways because we've got a 100 meg database that will eventually turn into something big if we become super successful. So
Right.
maybe help us define where that sweet spot is for where you would start looking at a solution like Vitess and where it fits into the ecosystem. We talked about some of the large organizations already.
So to be politically correct over here, I think from my independent where Vitess fits answer is, you have already invested in MySQL and you have some pain points. You know how the MySQL ecosystem works, but you want to improve it. And this is where Vitess actually fits right in, because it actually comes a lot of the control plane comes a lot of utilities that you would actually implement yourself. Knowing those bundled in, that you don't have to worry about, like the backup and recoveries, the failovers, and the online schema changes, all of that you have to do it yourself, right? You have to either bring in a tool to or manage yourself in-house or homebrew, something like that. So all of that stuff actually fits right in if you already have some investment in it. Investment meaning it could be some, time and material, there's some manpower already, or you have actually running cluster that is somewhat struggling, not being super scalable, or not ready for the prime time. Like you said, if your company becomes successful, and then what do you do then? And it becomes a pain point later. So that I see Vitess implementation would be a proactive for like going forward. It won't be an overnight thing. There'll be knowledge, gaps. There will be learning curve for implementation, and there will be also some testing and development around Vitess. One thing that people also ask me about is like, do I have to shard? No, the answer is no, you don't have to shard. And we also know there are shops large enough, they're just pointing Vitess to their backend database, not actually doing the sharding. So that we can take also as phase one approach, because then you're actually adopting to a new technology, trying to implement this framework in front of your database, but not sharding. So Vitess works pretty good with the uncharted database, uncharted key space.
What's the benefit of that? That's an interesting use case. I hadn't run into that or heard about that before.
Yeah, not many people know.
Why would you
not
do the sharding?
Vitess is a framework, right? So it's actually written in Go, and it handles connections well. It has a connection and pooling and proxy in front. So you actually have, as soon as you do that, you have some sort of a connection control and a gateway, right? The VT gate, it's a gateway. So you already have control over your what's coming in, right? So you can actually manage that. Then Vitess comes with integration to Orchestrator, Extra Backup, all those other great open source tools that you would actually have to, implement yourself. So that's two, or that part of that. And then the next step is, once you're into that ecosystem, okay, now you want to, shard by your customer ID, you want to shard by region, you want to do GDPR, you want to do, geolocations. Now you're ready for the, the next step for the prime time, right? So doing all that other security and compliance things, or you want to do somewhat of a operator with the Kubernetes, then you can actually adopt to that after that. Because
so that
otherwise,
becomes easier as you go on.
That becomes much easier once you're into that framework, and that's the idea of doing that. And topology manager adoption is also another thing. Along with the Vitess, you bring in etcd or Zookeeper. Some people still use console for that, so that's another component. And on your area. So if you imagine that architecture, it actually has benefits to adopt. And then you're ready for, okay, I want to do sharding, and that's you're ready for doing that.
Okay.
That's what I see where it fits. And the data size wise, we say a shard is good for like 250 gig around, like
Okay.
you know. And most companies, as you have a lot of experience, face difficulties with data size over terabyte with MySQL. Then things start, falling over. So
Okay. Great.
hopefully that answers a little bit and gives them some ideas for our listeners.
Yes. And so we've reached Vitess 9 now. So that I saw that announcement just this past week or two ago. So tell us what's in Vitess 9. What's exciting? What are you excited about?
We are very excited about MySQL compatibility and the frameworks that it supports. So because Vitess has its own gateway that actually understands and then interprets the queries and then sends it to the underlying ecosystem. It had some limitations per the MySQL compatibility. So you wouldn't be able to do in the past drop in your database, bring your database and run it against the Vitess, right? So we are excited about the compatibility around that.
So Vitess 9 introduced more compatibility.
And more frameworks. So there are many frameworks that Vitess supports, and development frameworks I'm talking about, and then we get more checks, because those frameworks, to me, as a DBA, for a quarter century, does awkward things. They set some flags that you wouldn't set, and there are some. They use some functionality that normal, applications or normal database access don't use. So you need some compatibility around those. Like you run the framework testing, and then we have actually automated some of that, and then it runs through that framework with every change that we do. So
are you talking, when you're talking frameworks, are you talking like ORMs, or are you talking different frameworks? Can you give me an example?
Like Django, the application, like Ruby on Rails and on that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay.
So it's the ORM problem, really.
ORM, you probably have faced in the past, and there's like they'll do like some flag that's maybe even deprecated, and then they don't. So that's very good. So we are actually focusing on that. Also, the team has done amazing stuff on the innovation, and online DDLs is also some experimental stage right now, but it's going to be an amazing feature in Vitess. Like I call it a managed online DDL, and also because it's the thought process is sharded, so it actually handles the sharding logic on top of the regular online schema changes or online migrations, you would say. So that's an amazing innovation that we're bringing in, and the team is pushing forward. And also another integration of orchestrator integration within the Vitess. So the consensus algorithms and choosing the best failover methodology behind your cluster. So that's very interesting stuff going in. Like I said, it's hundreds. It's very difficult to say there's hundreds of stuff going in. We are also expecting contribution from Slack on VT admin, where we're gonna have a new GUI.
Okay, cool.
Base. There is some, but it's old and doesn't cover every scenario. So there's a new contribution coming in. So it's very exciting. Yes, there's a lot going on.
There sounds like it. All right, Alkin.
The blog post is very short, so I try to keep it very short so that people tend to read it. The long blog posts don't get as much attention. So there's a lot.
People have a very short attention span, so they want to get those quick hits, right?
You know better than I do.
All right, Alkin, thank you for sitting down with us, telling us a little bit about Vitess, the project, talking about your sailing. And we appreciate you taking some time today to chat with us and share with us what you're working on.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time and inviting me over.
Wow, what a great episode that was. We really appreciate you coming and checking it out. We hope that you love open source as much as we do. If you like this video, go ahead and subscribe to us on the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, tune in to next week's episode. We really appreciate you coming and talking open source with us.